This is a production of PBS Charlotte.
This week on Unspun, the politics of campaign ads. You know, you can't escape campaign commercials during an election year, no matter how hard you try. So we'll talk with a political ad expert about what happens behind the scenes before you see the ads on your screens. Plus, the top 5 most effective types of political commercials. No matter how much you hate them, I hate to tell you, they actually work. And Backspin, Unfiltered, who is really responsible for most ads, especially the negative ones. A hint, not the candidates. Unspun is next on PBS Charlotte. In today's America, welcome to the spin game. Believe me, I know, I'm Pat McCrory. When I was governor and mayor, I played the spin game. I was played by the spin game. But aren't we all done being spun? Let's take the spin out of the world we're in, here on Unspun. Good evening, I'm Pat McCrory, and welcome to Unspun, a show that tells you what politicians are thinking, but not saying. The closer we get to Election Day, the more you'll see the same campaign commercials over and over again, especially the negative ads. You know, the ones I'm talking about with the same old soundbite of a candidate taken completely out of context. Maybe a black and white photo that makes the candidate look like they're up to no good, and a creepy voiceover saying the candidate is wrong for North Carolina, or even worse, wrong for America. Here's an attack ad they did about me in my last election, the Republican primary for U.S. Senate.
Pat McCrory called Romney
a man of incredible courage.
But on Trump?
Donald Trump is destroying democracy.
No wonder Biden loves McCrory.
Donald Trump, get off the stage. Let Joe Biden take over the #1 position.
The real Pat McCrory.
Wow, in that ad, they called me a liberal faker. Come on, really? That ad, by the way, actually came from members of my own political party. With friends like that, who needs enemies? You know what? It's like that in both parties. In nearly every election, false claims repeated again and again and again on TV and now online too. And here's the reason why. Because behind the scenes, the candidates and the consultants all know that negative advertising actually works. Who cares if your ads are misleading, as long as they lead to more votes? How about if we hook up every candidate to a lie detector so we all know where candidates really stand on the issues, and so voters know who's really telling them the truth and who's not? Now, wouldn't that make a great campaign commercial? Later on Unspun, I'll count down my top 5, the top 5 reasons why political commercials work, no matter how much you hate them. But first, let's hear from someone who was in the room when my governor's campaign commercials were actually being made. He tells candidates how to get their message out, and then he sells that brand to the public. He's not cheap, but his commercials work. Fred, it's an honor to have you. Thanks for being on the show.
Sure, Pat. Great to see you again.
Fred, so when a client picks you and you recruit clients also, what are some of the decision-making matrix that you use in determining what type of commercial that you're going to use to sell this candidate and get them elected through a TV commercial?
Well, I approach that differently than most do, Pat. I know you're not surprised to hear. Most people come from a political background, and they're issue-oriented and message-oriented. I come from the real ad world, and I'm candidate-oriented. And I always say that if I can come to adore my client, I think I can find a way to make ads that have people feel that heart and feel no voter is going to agree with every candidate on every single issue. But if they can like you or love you or look up to you or admire you, they will vote for you, even if they don't agree on some issues. So that's how I look at it. So I look for people I like you.
Well, I've seen you do some ads, for example, for the former governor of Michigan. And he had a completely different personality than me. I was a little more outgoing. And in meeting him, what qualities did you see in him? And then how did you sell at that time, the future governor of the state of Michigan, Snyder, Governor Snyder.
I'll give you a very quick version of how that happened. I got hired before I ever met Rick. They called me out of the clear blue sky, so need you to do this race. You're filming Wednesday. This was on a Monday. So I was on a plane the next day to somewhere, Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we met at a restaurant, and there were 8 people at the table and 1 empty chair. So when I walked up, I knew that was mine. I didn't say hello to Rick. I went around the table and introduced myself. And finally I got to him and I said, "And you must be Rick." And he I noticed he already looked like a governor. He was dressed well and all that. But when I got to him and he goes, "Oh, hi, how are you?" He had this really a terrible voice. And I keep this little notepad in my pocket and I wrote something down. And at the end of the dinner, normally I have 10 or 12 pages. I just had one thing written down, and that was the word nerd. So the whole time I'm hearing him talk, I mean, this guy, all he wanted for Christmas when he was 6 years old was a subscription to Forbes magazine. And when he turned 12, he added Fortune. And he graduated with his law degree and his CPA degree or whatever early, before I even went to college. You know, things like that. He was a genius and a really good guy, but he had an unusual persona. So at the end of the dinner, he looked at me and he goes, "Okay, Mr. Hollywood, how are you going to get me elected governor?" And his wife was sitting across the table, round table. And I couldn't look at her because I figured she was going to kill me. And I said, "Well, the way I look at it, Michigan has tried Republican governors, Democrat governors, male governors, female governors, mean governors, happy governors, and nothing's worked. You're still 50th out of 50 in any category that counts." And then I paused and I looked right at Rick and I said, "I think it's time for a nerd." And there was this deathly silence at the table. And his wife suddenly shrieks out and goes, "Oh, honey, that's you." And all of a sudden, I knew it was sold. And I sat up all night writing nerd commercials. The general consultant changed it slightly to One Tough Nerd, but Rick Snyder became the nerd for 8 years in Michigan, did a great job, I think, as governor. And to this day, he's introduced as One Tough Nerd. Wow. So it stuck.
Well, let's talk about negative ads, especially with the advent of Super PAC big money. And it seems as though, I've had some major negative ads against me when running for governor several times and the U.S. Senate. Tell me about the concept of what type of negative ad to use and why are they always in black and white?
Well, first of all, I hate those ads. And you'll never see me do those. I call them Pat McCrory lies when he says such and such ads. And they're always yellow, flashing headlines. I saw one last night against a client of mine. And it was the meanest thing I'd ever seen. But I wrote them immediately and said, "This isn't going to work." It's like, it sounds and looks like every other negative political ad out there. I think the same guy voices all of them. And he has this voice kind of, it's just, it makes me ill. They work if you just try to be just a little bit different. Again, it's the ad background versus the political background. The political people think as long as the message, Pat McCrory steals cars for a living, as long as the message is there, it'll work. I don't. I think that goes in one ear and out the other, especially these days, especially in the last 5 or 6 years when there's such an enormous preponderance of negative work.
Real quick.
I would look at...
Yeah, real
Go
quick.
ahead.
I'm just kind of curious, too. Is the politics of campaign commercials, does it matter what position they're running for versus what type of ad you run, whether it's Congress or mayor or governor or the U.S. Senate? Because they're different roles. So therefore, do you adjust based upon what they're running for?
You certainly adjust the issues, because federal issues are different from gubernatorial issues and things like that. In my world, to me only, in my company, what really matters is whether they like you or not and whether they trust you or not. Now, a governor it's a governor I always look at as a father or a grandfather that just happens to have a few million children. And you want to look up to that person. You want to trust him. You want to feel warmth for him. A senator is not quite the same. A senator, yes, you want to like them. Yes, you want to look up to them. But they're dealing with federal issues. They're dealing with war in Iran, and things like that. And that's just, it's a different relationship. Like Rick Snyder could get away with one tough nerd because he was a really good guy. And because you wanted somebody that had that feel for your family and was going to go out there and do whatever it takes to make things work. A little bit different in the Senate.
In the remaining minute we have, I'm kind of curious, what are the two best ads that you think have really made a difference in a campaign, national or statewide? And what do you think are the two worst ads? I'm just curious, real quick, in this political game of political advertisements.
Well, the worst ads, where could you start? I think 99% of them are not only bad, they're wasted money. I look at it and I think that the candidate, who you guys work so hard to raise every dollar, and then to put something on the air that looks like something everyone else did. There was a big deal a few years ago on the 10 best political ads of all time. I did 3 of them. I was very honored for that. And I believe Rick Snyder's initial ad was one of those. Best ads, I almost, Pat, have to say for me, because I don't want to step on competitors' toes or anything. But the first ad I did for Jim Inhofe, who's a United States Senator, now retired, and my uncle, put me in business in a pretty big way. And it was grizzled, toothless, bearded, tattooed convicts wearing pink ballerina outfits. And it was talking, and Jim, my uncle, thought I had been paid by his competitor. He got livid with me and ordered me to pull it off the air. Well, in those days, it took 5 days to get it off the air. By the next morning, he'd gotten so many compliments that the only time in his life, I might add, he called and apologized. Said he was wrong. He let me do whatever I wanted to run.
Well, we haven't got time for the worst ad because you're none of the worst ads. You do positive ads, and you did them for me. And listen, we're going to have you back sometime to talk more about the politics of political ads, and you're one of the best. Fred, it's an honor to have you.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, PBS Charlotte's Jeff Sonnier takes Unspun on the street to hear your thoughts on the politics of campaign ads.
Yeah, we're here in Freedom Park, which is pretty much free of all political advertising, and we're asking people about all those candidates who are running for political office and all those campaign commercials they're running on television. What do you think about the TV ads for candidates during election time?
Well, there's so many of them, it seems to be getting people confused.
How so?
Well, because, until we learn exactly, what everybody stands for and what they means, you don't know who to vote for.
Do you believe what you see in those TV commercials?
Not all of them.
They definitely will influence how I view a candidate. Yeah.
Negatively or positively, depends on the candidate?
Depends on the candidate and depends on the content of the commercial.
I mean, I would say they're a nuisance because they're not going to really change my opinion on anything.
We're not the target demographic for those ads quite yet, but I think for older generations who tend to maybe rely a little bit heavier on kind of news that they get online, then they could really impact what opinions they have and how they vote.
What about negative ads?
I especially think those are the most useless, yeah.
Why are they useless to you as a voter?
I mean, they're not really beneficial in promoting what you stand for.
I think that our voter base should be informed about candidates. Now, whether the stuff on the commercial is accurate and objective, probably not.
It does create polarization, and that has unfortunate kind of side effects on kind of how people, view politics and view each other.
Why do you think they spend so much money on so many ads during election time?
It's lies. They have to make sure they get the point across, and a lot of them are deceptions.
Yeah, that honest feedback from here in Freedom Park, probably not what the candidates want to hear right now about how effective or maybe ineffective their campaign ads really are between now and Election Day. Pat?
Thanks, Jeff. So what do you think about the issue? Email us your thoughts on how you see the politics of campaign ads to unspun@WTVI.org. Tonight, our top 5 countdown. We've got the top 5 most effective campaign ads, the political advertising that works best. And let's start out with number one. Number one, a typical ad which shows someone's bio and their qualifications and a little inner feeling of how they come across. Let me give you an example. Hi, I'm Pat McCrory. I learned my values growing up in Jamestown, North Carolina. I moved to Salisbury, where I got my education, and then I came to Charlotte, where I became a leader. Vote for me and governor so I can go to Raleigh and help the Carolina come back. How's that for a bio? Number 4, family and military. Oh, these are the best kind of ads. You see these all over the place. A beautiful candidate with a beautiful family. And if that doesn't work, you also show them in uniform. That's a big deal right now. The only thing different in a Republican primary, Republican primaries seem to have guns in the ads now. That's a big thing. So family, military, and sadly in the Republican primaries, often guns. Number 3, testimonials. The most famous testimonials in North Carolina politics is this. Andy Griffith did ads for Hunt, Easley, and Beverly Perdue when she ran against me in my first gubernatorial campaign. And when I saw that ad by Andy Griffith going, you need to vote for Beverly Perdue, I was dead in the water at that point in time. Testimonials by someone else bragging about you. And if it's someone popular like Andy Griffith, you got victory right there. Number 2, inspiration and hope. Inspiration is hope. The most famous, let's see, Ronald Reagan. It's Morning in America. It's Morning in America and just the American flag, the Statue of Liberty. It was one of the most effective campaign ads in history. And also another ad, Barack Obama, Hope and Change. It was extremely positive ad, Hope and Change, with a beautiful profile of Barack Obama. One of the most effective 2 ads by Reagan and Barack Obama. And last but not least, I hate to tell you, despite the feedback we got from the public, slam your opponent, negative campaign ads. Boy, that Pat McCrory, you know, he's a nice guy, but he's not a true conservative. You won't like him. He's done this, this, and this against North Carolina or Charlotte. Those are the most effective ads. No matter how much we hate them, people start believing them. Sad to say, in the world of politics, negative ads, they work. Next up, PBS Charlotte's Jeff Sonnier joins me for our Unspun one-on-one segment. Jeff, great to have you here.
And you know how it works. We take questions from tonight's topic and also from this week's headlines. I ask the questions, you answer the questions. That's why we call it one-on-one.
Let's have some fun.
Yeah, before we start, I want to show you a clip from your second governor's race, a campaign ad that was at the early part of your second governor's race. Let's take a look.
So why do we struggle? Politics. Concern about who gets the credit for good things or the blame for bad things. Here's a thought. Forget about politics. Fix our state. It would be an honor to help lead that turnaround. I'm Pat McCrory, and I'm running for governor.
So,
wow.
Okay, so that was an effective ad. Tell me about the brainstorming session that goes on between candidate and ad producer. How do you
Well,
come
Fred,
to
who has produced that ad, he knew I didn't want to run a negative ad, and he wanted a positive ad. I wanted a positive ad. He interviewed me for about 2 hours, and then he helped write that script based upon what I was telling him. And then we knocked out. It was a hard ad to produce because just walking that time, you had to get it within the 30 seconds. And they even had puddles I walked through. I still own that coat and wear it about once a week during the winter time. So that coat means a lot to me. Plus, we ran that during the Summer Olympics. during women's gymnastics, and I jumped up in the polls, which shows ads do work.
So you like that ad, but has anyone ever proposed an ad that you didn't like? You said, no, I can't do that.
Yeah, many times. The biggest one, I had a wonderful campaign manager in Jack Hawk in my first race and my second race. And he recommended an ad which brought up the killing of a wonderful student, the head of the student body at UNC Chapel Hill. This was right after Beverly Perdue had run a brutal negative ad against me on a total lie about garbage in North Carolina. I didn't know what it was about. And he took me to a restaurant and said, I've got an ad I want you to put up next week. It was 2 weeks to go in the campaign. And he showed me the ad basically blaming Beverly Perdue for the killing of this young student. And he said, this could put you over the top. You're behind right now. I said, I can't do it. I couldn't do it. And I'm so glad I didn't.
So we're talking about negative ads. I want to show you another.
And by the way, Jack Hawk then went, you're the boss.
Well, as far as negative ads, we're talking about that now. I want to look at another ad that ran in one of your campaigns in response to someone else's negative ad. Let's take a look at this ad, and I want to talk about it.
Did you see the TV attacks on Pat McCrory?
Who's doing them?
Folks who want to keep things going the same way in North Carolina.
Is he not well?
We have to change. That's McCrory. Good guy. Good plan.
Good fries.
I've forgotten. I have not seen that in a long time.
So you can fight fire with fire in some negative ads, or you can kind of turn it around. Talk about why you did that ad.
Well, I was getting attacked. I can't remember who was attacking me at that point in time, but we had to come back, and we wanted to do it with a little humor. And that was during the French fry issue at the national level.
Right.
And we thought we'd take on that. But you got to have money to do that. And during that campaign, I outspent my opponent 3-1. All the campaigns I lost, I got outspent 3-1. So we could afford to do a defensive ad, as we call it.
So when you're doing ads, are you worried that your ads are going to look like someone else's ads, especially when you've got a guy like Fred Davis who's doing ads for candidates all over the country?
Absolutely. In fact, you heard from one of the people you interviewed in Charlotte. They said all the ads look alike. And near the end of the campaign, if you wait until the very end of the campaign, people can't distinguish the ads. You've got to be unique, and you've got to get that out early and even try to get free publicity on a unique ad, so it gets even more publicity than what you pay for. It's a big trick in the trade to get free media on an ad that you don't have to pay for then.
Last question. I know there's been a lot of ads and a lot of campaigns. Talk about the ad that you remember that's your favorite.
My former high school English teacher, Miss Revels.
Sometimes a student is just special. Pat McCrory was a young leader when I taught him in Jamestown, so I wasn't surprised at what he accomplished as mayor. He wants to reward great teachers and for kids to learn to read before the 4th grade. When he does that for North Carolina, I'll give him a gold star.
Wow. I called her Mrs. Revels, and she called me Patrick. And I miss her dearly.
That's this week's One-on-One. Thanks, Pat.
To wrap up our show this week, we've got an unfiltered segment. I'm going to tell you the secret of where most of those negative attack ads that you see on TV, where they really come from. So in the old days of politics, prior to the Supreme Court case called Citizens United, almost all political commercials were sponsored by the candidates themselves. But after the court's ruling in 2010, which basically allowed independent groups in the private sector to run ads with unlimited money and almost no guidelines. In fact, campaigns have now been hijacked by those groups, and now it's like the Wild West out there. By law, the candidates aren't allowed to coordinate the messaging in ads with these independent groups raising all the money. But the whole thing has become kind of a dangerous joke, and voters don't know what's happening behind the wall. Behind the wall of politics, there's the feeling they're talking to each other. So now the ads you see about the candidates are actually sponsored by the big money groups, and there's no transparency, nothing at all about who those groups are or where the big money is coming from. So the next time you see an ad for president or governor or senator or Congress, make sure you look to see who paid for it. Usually it's some group with a patriotic name and zero information about their funding or the real agenda behind the ad. You know, it's a sad part of politics that fools the public and now controls the politicians. Believe me, I know, and I've definitely been played by this game. Well, that's this week's real and sometimes uncomfortable truth. I hope you'll come back next week as we explore the politics of polling. That's on our next Unspun, where we'll tell you what politicians are thinking but not saying. Good night, folks.
A production of PBS Charlotte.